Welcome to Lead Different.
What if the reason your leadership feels heavy is because you were never meant to carry it alone? In this conversation with Silas Mähner, we confront something most high-performing leaders don't want to admit. Striving isn't the same as surrender. Ambition isn't the same as obedience. And impact doesn't come from control. It comes from trust. Silas shares what truly drives faith-led founders, and it's not ego, platform, or pressure to prove themselves. It's a radical, almost uncomfortable belief. You don't have to earn your calling. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You don't have to strive your way into significance. You simply have to say yes. God, I trust you. Lead me. This conversation is about what happens when a leader stops performing and starts surrendering. Because when you lead from trust instead of fear, your impact doesn't just grow, it multiplies. Let's dive in.
Why not leadership? Why not lead different?
Welcome to Lead Different, the podcast that redefines leadership and challenges the status quo. Hosted by Daniel Dominguez, founder and CEO of Why Not Leadership. This show is your compass to becoming a better leader through the power of self-awareness. Good leaders foster teams that are engaged, empowered, and energized. Join us on this transformative journey as we equip you with the tools and insights to lead different. Get ready to challenge the ordinary and embrace self-aware leadership. This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different, because great leaders change the world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lead Different podcast. I have a great guest for you guys today, Silas Mähner, founder of Catholic Founders. He's got a big Substack group. He's got a podcast that I have been really impressed with. I actually found one of his episodes on YouTube, listened to it, and said, this is a guy I want to have on the Lead Different podcast. And he's also got a peer group that you can join for Catholic Founders. So if you've been listening to our episodes, our first episode of the year this year was with Father John Carney, who, hey, Silas, you're part of this big announcement. He's our chief spiritual officer at the Why Not Leadership. We had him on the podcast. He was our most viewed podcast that we've ever done. And the more he and I talked, I said, you know what? We don't have a chief spiritual officer. And I think if you're a Catholic company, you should have a chief spiritual officer. So I put together a proposal. We're closing the deal over a burrito tomorrow. But man, that's the kind of guest that you can expect in 2026. And Silas Mähner is one of those types of guests. Welcome to the show, Silas.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. You're probably the first person to ever introduce me with my last name pronounced correctly.
You know, all it takes is a little bit of research, Silas, because I was looking, I wanted to say Mähner, but I looked and then I just listened to a few of your podcasts and you introduced yourself. So I said, it's Silas Mähner. Let's make sure I get that right. I even put it on here. I spelled it Mayner so I wouldn't mess it up.
Exactly.
You got to do your homework, right? And
100%.
One of the reasons I have you on, Silas, so you're a younger person than I am by quite a bit, but you're doing a lot of things really well. And one of the people that in my audience is a lot of founders and CEOs of small to mid-sized companies. And I was so impressed with the speed at which you execute. And I'd love to hear about your journey founding Catholic Founders, ErthTech. You got multiple enterprises that you're running, and you're doing them all at a really high level. Tell us a little bit of your background, what you're working on right now, and where you're spending your time.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it somewhat condensed because I can easily be very, very long-winded. But I'm from just a country boy from the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. I grew up the oldest of 8 kids in a big Catholic family, and I grew up working for my dad in his cabinet shop. So he's a carpenter; he makes custom cabinetry, and I started working for him since I was like maybe 8 years old. And at one point during that childhood, I knew that I wanted to be a business owner. Initially, I thought, hey, maybe I'll take over my dad's business someday. Eventually, I changed my mind on that and then decided, hey, I got to go find my own path. But long story short, I got very lucky early on in my career where this individual named Jack Schultz, who is a very successful man who started a company with basically nothing in the 70s and sold it for around $100 million in 2000. He played a big part in my life. So he is the one who restored the church that I grew up going to. It's this Latin Mass parish in Wausau, Wisconsin, kind of in the middle of nowhere. And I don't know how much money he put into it, but he turned it into this absolute gem of a church in kind of the Midwest, middle of nowhere. And one of my first jobs after I graduated high school, I was also homeschooled, by the way. I went through the Seton home study program, but first job out of high school was plucking weeds in the gardens of the church that I grew up going to. And Jack was there at this point. He's retired. He's, in his 80s. And he just starts mentoring me and says, hey, the number one asset in business is contacts. And he would constantly say that. He would just kind of give me advice without me asking for it. But the point is that really set me on a different trajectory. It kind of gave me the belief in myself that if somebody like Jack, who's, also a farm boy from Wisconsin, if he can do this, maybe I could do something great too. So, fast forward, the very short version is I ended up getting into the recruitment space in 2020. Some company offered me an opportunity to move out to New York City and work in renewable energy recruitment. Obviously, and for anybody who's familiar, that at that time, the renewable energy and clean tech movement was really, really exploding. Kind of 2018, 19, 20 really started to take off, and then kind of died down a little bit around 2023. But I worked there for 4 years, and during that time, I was constantly trying to figure out, hey, how could I start my own business? What could I do? I always wanted to do something that was really grandiose, something that was new and innovative. And I just kept like tossing ideas around, but never felt like there was quote unquote the right idea to pursue, that $100 million a year business idea, right? I was always filtering it through that lens. Like, if I build this business, could I sell it for $100 million someday? Because at the time, that was kind of my metric for what I wanted to achieve on the outcome. And as a result, I just ended up not doing anything. I had some side projects. I have another podcast called CleanTech that I was running and doing recruitment at the time, but there was just never like a real good time to leave. So fast forward, eventually I got married. And then once I had kind of gotten through that new phase of life, I was like, I'm really dissatisfied and working for somebody else. So let me start my own firm. Like, it's not rocket science. I know how to do recruitment. I know how to make money with it. I'll be able to provide for my family. And it's much more tangible, the steps I have to take to get and start that business. So I started that business. It's called ErthTech Talent, but we recently rebranded to ErthSearch. And we do the same thing. So I recruit CleanTech talent for CleanTech companies in the US. That could be sales people, engineers, executives, et cetera, whatever you want. And we do it for about half the price of other firms. So that's ErthSearch, and that's how I actually make money. But the part about Catholic founders, and I'm coming around to this here, is this kind of coincided with a lot of this. So the story that I mentioned in the beginning with Jack Schultz, I believe that is the real kernel that in my mind made me realize, hey, entrepreneurship is a very interesting lever that we can pull to affect the lives of other people, and especially through the lens of our Catholic faith. So sometime around, 2018, 19, I had started having ideas or asking myself the question, like, what would it look like if Jesus was a CEO of a company? And I just kind of imagined, Jack Schultz and the things that he had done and the way he had impacted my life. And I started to ask these questions and wonder, there has to be more to what corporations could look like and the impact that they could have, much more than just making money and quote unquote raising people out of poverty, right? So I ended up setting those ideas kind of on hold once I moved to New York City. I hardly had any money when I moved there. I was like, I have to make this work. I don't have a backup plan. There's nobody I can call to bail me out if things go south. So I worked really hard and kind of put some of those questions on hold. And then once 2024 came around and I was about to start my recruitment business, my own firm, I had these ideas still bouncing around in my head, and I had a lot of the framework for Catholic founders scoped out. And I publicly launched my business on the feast of St. Joseph the Worker on May 1st, 2024. And in the evening that day, I was thinking to myself, I didn't really do anything to honor St. Joseph today. So what am I going to do about that? And it was like literally 10 p.m. at night. And I said, you know what? I had the first blog post written. I already had the Substack created. I was like, I'm just going to generate some real quick graphics for the logo with ChatGPT. Thankfully, we've moved away from those original ones. And I'm going to publish the first thing. I'm going to publish it. So I think it was like 11 p.m. at night on that day. I just decided to send it. So this goes back to my thing about speed. I'm pretty impulsive with some of these items. But I published it, and within like a couple of weeks, I ended up having a number of people upgrade to a paid subscription. I wasn't expecting that at all. I didn't have any promises of what you're going to get from paid subscription. I didn't even have real cadence to how much I was going to post. But because people did that, I said, wow, there must be something here. And obviously I continued to invest in it. And, fast forward roughly a year and a half, this will probably come out closer to 2 years in. We've got a much bigger production, I guess you could say. We've got a podcast, a newsletter, and now we have an official, we call it the Catholic Founders Guild. It's effectively a peer group of other Catholic business owners who believe that they are called to be more than just entrepreneurs. They're called to be stewards of the gifts that God gave them and the resources that God gave them in the world, so they can help be God's hands and feet in the world. So that's the list of Catholic founders, and that, for the record, does not really pay the bills. What pays the bills is the recruitment firm, and I've got 6 or 7 contractors there. But that's me. That's me in a nutshell.
Man, that's really good, and thanks for taking us back to the beginning. I always like to hear the seed that was planted. So it sounds like Jack Schultz was a big part of that formation for you, and I love what he said to you. In entrepreneurship and business, it's connections. And I said to you in the pre-show, we talk about that all the time. Good friend of mine, Adam Packard. You probably got to meet him. Great guy, works in the recruitment space. And he said to me during his podcast interview, he said, Dan, he with the most conversations wins. You got to have conversations, meet as many people as you can, learn and listen. Right. One of the goals I set for the podcast is I want to talk 80%. I want you to talk 80% of the time. Meeting people and listening to them. Be curious, not judgmental, is so important. Being curious and learning more about people. Everybody's favorite topic is themselves. And the more we allow them to share about themselves, the better we, as an executive coach and as a leadership coach, I love listening because that helps me figure out what it is that people need help with. I don't even have to work that hard. They give me the problems and I get to work on them. And then we set plans that are custom built for them versus me trying to say, here's what you need to do. Mm-hmm. Right. And I'm sure you see that all the time. Silas, I want to ask you a couple of questions. You mentioned the goal of Catholic founders. I love the thought of, because one of the things I say is I want to help founders and CEOs scale their business without losing their soul. I have a feeling you have a similar probably mission. What is that? What's that higher mission for Catholic founders for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to necessarily pick on what you said there, but I would say, I think that the fundamental premise of scale your business without losing your soul is actually in some ways the wrong premise in the first place, because that implies that scaling your business usually, or in many cases, would lead to losing your soul. And, maybe you could argue that. I would actually argue it's probably the other way around. If you're somebody who approaches your faith first and you are Catholic first, and you do everything through the lens of your Catholic faith, scaling your business is actually your path to sainthood, right? So similar to like the way that St. Jose Maria Escriva would say, you're called to holiness in your career or what you do in your ordinary, quote unquote, ordinary life. I think it's the same thing with entrepreneurs, right? Entrepreneurship just has a larger scope to it in many cases than a standard career, because you are a steward of the lives and of many people, the families who work for you, the customers that you support or provide services to, your suppliers. I mean, there's so many different people that you interact with as an entrepreneur. And if you do it well, you are leaning into this co-creative nature that we have as individuals, right? In Genesis, it says we're creating God's image and likeness. That has nothing to do with how we look, and it has everything to do with the nature of our soul, right? In marriage and in having children, we are co-creators in a really, really like the truest sense of the term. But also that applies to our abilities as entrepreneurs or even just employees per se too. You don't have to be necessarily an entrepreneur, but the things that we can create, this is leaning into godliness, if you will, right? And you can, of course, misconstrue that. You can do it for your own sake. You can do it for fame or for money, but that's not the correct method, right? A good steward does the best things, even if they will end up getting recognition, but they're not doing it for recognition. They're doing it because they know at the end of the day, they're going to have to answer to their master for how they use their skills, their talents, all of the things that were given to them. They have to lean into that to the fullest extent possible. So that's the point of Catholic Founders, is that we are here to help Catholic entrepreneurs or Catholics who run businesses to understand how to become saints in the process and how to recognize some of the mystical aspects of their calling as entrepreneurs, as stewards in the world. Things like, if you end up selling your business, say you do, I'm not necessarily the biggest proponent of selling businesses. I like people to build for the long term in mind, but let's say you do. Let's say you sell your business for $100 million. How much of that money do you individually need as yourself? Let's say you've got even a big family of 8 kids. Right. Do you really need $100 million? Let's assume it's after tax, by the way. Okay. After the government takes their cut. You don't really need that much money. I would propose that most people, if they live a truly modest life where they're not trying to be flashy and have, a whole bunch of Porsches and a yacht, they can live a pretty modest life, and they could probably stash away, let's say, maybe 10, 15, 20, maybe even, let's say, really generously, $30 million of that. They could live off of that without ever having to work and have a nice life for their family. I'm not talking about living in dire situations. They could have a nice life. What are they going to do with the rest of the 70 million? Maybe, just maybe, they had this opportunity to sell the business, and they shouldn't be selfish. Maybe they should give their employees a large cut of that. There was a guy recently who was who was in the news. I forget where it was, but I saw this guy sold his company, and I think it was a manufacturing company of some sort, and he gave his employees huge payouts. I think it was over $1 million or close to $1 million each person, which was unheard of. These were like, blue collar workers or something like that. And he gave them all large payouts. That is the kind of thing that can change lives. And if he recognized that this doesn't belong to him, the skills that he was given at his birth, or the interest that he was given through his life, through who his parents were, when in time he was born, what geography he was born into, all of those things are effectively chosen by God for us. So if you recognize that, and you recognize that your very life is not your own, it's a gift from God, then what are you going to do with it? You got to return those skills to him. You need to give those things back. So if you say, oh no, the 100 million is mine. I earned it. I worked so hard. I'm a capitalist. I put all that effort in. I put all the risk in. Guess what? That you don't need all that. It's extremely excessive. And this is what leads to the backlash against wealthy people and against billionaires, is that they're not taking this stewardship approach to the people around them. I mean, there's plenty of negative things about him, but Rockefeller and so I think Carnegie too would be these people who ended up spending a lot of money building libraries and building public works, right? We don't see a lot of this anymore these days, right? There's a lot of reasons I would opine as to why that is. I won't go into that for now, but the general principle I'm trying to get at here is that there is it's very, very important that we understand our position in the world and why we were created to have such success. It's not for our own benefit. It's for us to benefit those around us, our family, our community, etc., and the church.
Man, I really, really appreciate you sharing that. And one of the things that I want to talk about that you mentioned is a couple of things, and never feel badly about sharing a different way of looking at something. That's exactly why I have you on. And I think what I was getting at is there's some people who aren't living that way, right? And they're maybe scaling, and they're driven by greed. Those people that we're talking about. And maybe they're Catholic and they're cradle Catholics, but they're those Catholics that are Easter and Christmas Catholics. And so they're not really living that faith. And those are the people that I think Catholic founders can help. If you come into this group, you're going to be dealing with a lot of other people who are using their business, their entrepreneurship as a path to sainthood. I love what you said earlier, by the way, Silas. I have to tell you, I belong to my parish men's group, and we've consecrated ourselves to St. Joseph. Not once. We used this consecration, which was fantastic. But have you seen Devin's?
Devin Shaw. I have not read his.
Man, he is that is a serious consecration. He really gets into the manhood and fatherhood portions of it. So love that you launched your company on the Feast of St. Joseph. I was actually confirmed at St. Joseph the Worker parish when I was a baby. So I was confirmed as a baby. So I have a lot of St. Joseph history. So anytime you mention St. Joseph, I feel like, man, that was a connection that was meant to happen. One of the things I like to say, and I think you brought it up, when you're trying to use your business to become a saint, we all have an exit interview that we're going to face one day, right? And we want to hear those great words, well done, good and faithful servant. And I think one of the things you're talking about, Silas, is we all have a potential that God gave us. And he's either going to say, well done, good and faithful servant. This is the talent I gave you, and this is what you did. What we don't want to hear is, this is the talent I gave you, and this is what you did. You went and buried it, or you were afraid to do something, and you didn't trust me. That's the other big part, I think, that comes in when you're an entrepreneur. I love that you did it so young, Silas. I waited till I was in my 50s. I was 49 before I decided to leave the corporate world, and I wouldn't turn around ever. because I just love the autonomy that we have, the freedom that we have. Just being able to have these kinds of conversations like you and I are having, and not worrying about, are we going to offend a certain group of people? Well, we have our group of people that we want to work with. And I believe when you tell people what you believe, you attract people who believe what you believe. And you also repel people who don't believe what you believe. And that's okay too, right? Because what's the point of dealing with people who are eventually going to clash with you? So, man, let's talk a little bit about, you talked about speed. You were, I think you were, last time I talked to you, you were in California. I think you were recording episodes in California with the guys from Scent. So there, we run in a lot of similar circles. I'm a member of Scent. I'm also a member of Catholic Owned. I've had Jeff Scheffelbein on the podcast recently. I think that was the initial interview that I saw that you did.
I think it was episode 13, I want to say.
Yeah, it caught my attention, and I said, so I had Jeff on the podcast, so he'll be on. I think he'll air before you, but then we're going to have you on. A lot of cool things that you guys talked about, but tell me about what it means to use the gifts that you have. So what do you consider the gifts? Because one of the things I coach on is do what you do best. We should spend 80% of our time doing what we love to do that we're good at. And then we should hire out the other stuff, because that's 100%. That's where we spend time in our zone of genius. What's the philosophy of yours in terms of using your gifts and your charisms?
Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't say I have strong frameworks for this. I'll do my best to sort through it live here, but I, for a long time, wanted to be all things to all people. I wanted to be good at everything. And I tried my best to do that. But in the end, I have started to realize, once I have started to scale my business, that there are many things I'm just not good at. Mm-hmm. I'm great at ideas. I know I can retain a lot of information from all of I've consumed a lot of content from entrepreneurship, circles. And I have a lot of these ideas still in my head, but I can't execute them well often. Oftentimes I say, hey, we need to do this thing. But in doing that thing, it'll require that you show up every single week to do that. So I've leaned into hiring a bunch of different contractors, usually overseas. That's part of my business model, is to keep costs low. I try to keep software costs and personnel costs as low as possible, while still paying people well. And I can do that with my overseas talent. And they are really good at execution. They're good at enablement. I'm a big fan recently of Patrick Lencioni's 6 working genius areas. I forget exactly how they call it, but the 6 areas of working genius. Yeah. And for me, I forget the exact terminologies, but I'm the kind of person who likes to spin things up and get people motivated. And other people they have the tenacity to follow through on things. I didn't want to admit it, because it was, I think, part of my upbringing is that we were always considered reliable people. Like my dad, if he said he was going to do something, by golly, he was going to do it, right? He would make sure it got done, even if it required us, working till midnight 5 days in a row just to make sure it got done. So I think that part of me really resisted the idea of acknowledging that, hey, I'm not great at finishing things on occasion. So I for a long time just didn't want to delegate that out. Now I have, and now my business is growing much, much better. So I've started to lean into things that I am best at. Other skills I think are, this is more of a macro thing. Everybody has unique experiences. I mentioned this before, right? God created your soul specifically at the time, to the parents, to the geography, all those things, very, very specifically. It was not an accident. And you have to go on this journey and recognize that he has given you all of these context clues, the experiences you have, the conversations you have, the people who shape your worldview, all of these things, they are basically leading you to understand what is your unique role as the main player in this play, right? You've got this Broadway production, right? You are the main character. You don't actually know what is going on yet, but you can look around and figure out from all of the clues around, what am I called to do with this? And that, I think, is the most exciting thing ever, because you talked about potential, right? We have probably, in most cases, 100 times or maybe even 1,000 times more potential than we realize. And if we just lean into our own human abilities, I guess you could say, there's a lot of people who, without God, have achieved great things, right? Without any sort of faith or godliness, they've achieved drastic things. Now, imagine you take that type of person who leans into their own skills and their own kind of human abilities, if you will. Imagine you put that person now with the multiplier effect of God going in front of you and making things happen the way he wants them to. Imagine what you can achieve in that case, right? And this is beyond what we could fathom. Now, I think that we all need to look into those into those circumstances of our lives and realize that there is greatness called for each of us. The greatness may be running a massive company. It may be, employing thousands of people and transforming the culture, viscerally. But it could be things like Saint Teresa of Lisieux. She lived a great life despite it being very short. I think she lived to 24 years old. And she did all of the little things with greatness, right? She was willing to do those small things with greatness. And in her own way, that led to massive transformation of many other people in the world because she leaned into what she was called to. So this is, again, for all of us, there's going to be unique skills and unique things that we are called to. We have to figure out what those are by being attentive. And you can't figure those things out and you can't be attentive unless you are spending time on a daily basis with God. Daily mass, morning prayer throughout the day, etc. You cannot know God and know what he's asking you to do without spending time with him. It'd be like calling somebody your best friend who all you do is wave at them on your way out the door and say, hey, have a good day. That's all you do. How are you going to know their interests? How are you going to know what kind of food they like? How are you going to know what their dreams are? That's the whole point. So in terms of like what specific skills that I have, I try to lean into the things that I feel natural at, that I'm kind of drawn to. Doing things. A lot of times I'll start projects without even Googling if there's somebody else doing it. If I just feel that there's not like something there, I'll go and I'll do it. After I started Catholic Founders, a lot of people said, hey, that kind of sounds like scent. And I'm like, well, I understand why you think that. It's not the same. It's very different. But right. I didn't even know that scent existed when I started this, right? So there's lots of different angles that we could take there, but I really do think it is kind of lean into what's natural to you, not to your sinful inclinations, obviously, but like lean into the things that motivate you and get you excited. At this point, I spend maybe 15 hours a week on Catholic Founders. And again, it does not make money. It really costs me a lot of time. You could say it costs me a lot of money because I'm not, doing my actual business. Right. But I'm very motivated to do it. And it really excites me. I could be dead tired and have a podcast in the evening or super early in the morning. And, usually I go into there a little groggy, but I come out just energized and ready to go, fired up for the next day. So that's my general take on that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good take. And listen, we're going to spend some time together afterward. One of the things I help people find is what is that zone of genius? And you and I are very similar. I literally just resigned from a development committee and that I founded for my daughter's school. And I spent about 3 years in it. But what I have found is I'm really good at the beginning. I'm really good at starting stuff. And then once it gets running and everything's running, and then there's a pattern and there's, what, I want to go do something else. I want to go start something else. So I think we're going to probably have similar results on that YOS discovery that I sent you. I use the YOS discovery and the Colby and with every founder that I work with. And what I have found is you spend the time where you fit best. And so I already knew. And you know how I noticed that they no longer needed me? I kept having ideas, right? And you and I are probably full of ideas. We're like, how about we try this? How about we try this? In the beginning, they love it because you're getting things started. So we give that energy. But once it's running and everything, they're like, okay, stop with the ideas. We've got this, right? And so when you feel that energy starting to shift, it's time for us. They're not saying you're bad. It's not anything wrong with you. It's time for me to go start somewhere else. Somebody that needs this energy, that initial energy that I bring. Whenever we start, it sounds like you're very similar. The other part that I've done is there are people, like you said, who are very detail-oriented, and they're great at follow-through. Guess what? I hired somebody to just be that person for me because I do not need Sunil does it with the podcast. He sends out all the pre-show stuff. He checks the bios. We do all of that stuff so I can show up and be at my best, because what I really enjoy doing is having the conversation. I don't want to design the graphics. I don't want to create the show flow document. And so we're happy to let people whose talents are there. Sunil is a right way guy. He's a systems and processes guy. And you saw, how much follow-up he does. He does great research. And I just know, hey, I heard Silas, great interview with Jeff Scheffelbein. I want him on my show. So let's do that. And then it magically happens. And then you get to show up and do what you do best. So I love that you talked about that. Tell me a little bit more about what the dream is for Catholic Founders. Because as I hear you, I want to see you doing this full time, because I can tell, and I'll tell you this story. When I was a leader in the medical device space, I was a national sales director, and I had lots of people working for me. I remember one guy that, just incredibly talented, but couldn't ever meet his quota. And we wonder, what the heck this guy is really good. When we see him in front of physicians, he's fantastic. And turned out he really liked property management. He had some properties, and that's what lit him up. So I had a conversation with him, and I started asking him about that. And man, when he talked about his properties, it was like, oh, when we talked to him about his quote, it was like, they don't want to meet with me. We've ended up letting him go and go do what he loved to do, and he was so happy. So let's go to that place where when you get there, you're 100% in and you're loving it. So what's the dream for Catholic founders?
So I think it's a very challenging question with thinking about going all in on it, and it's not because I don't believe in the dream. So the overall goal that is clear to me. That is that we can effectively form and give the means for Catholic entrepreneurs and Catholic business owners to understand their role and what they can achieve in the world and transform the entire culture through their businesses. Because again, if you are viewing things properly, let's say you run as a Catholic in the way that I would suggest you do. You live at a way that's below your means, or at like a very kind of modest lifestyle. So if your business is excelling, and if you're a virtuous person, your business should excel. You're going to have excess capital. What are you going to do with that? You could build churches. You could build schools. You could, put up big statues of the Blessed Virgin Mary. You could do all sorts of things. And that is transforming the culture of America specifically to be a much more godly culture. That is the objective. I believe that one entrepreneur can impact the world more than 1,000 other people who are just working a job could, right? Because of the amount of reach that they can have. And this doesn't mean you have to build a kind of venture-backed startup where you're going to scale quickly and do all that kind of traditional Silicon Valley stuff. This could just be running a dentist organization. Like, I actually have a guy coming on very soon you should have on too. He's amazing. He runs Mercy Dental. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. It's Daniel something. And he runs a dentist organization in Madison, Wisconsin, called Mercy Dental, and they have, I think, like 13 locations now. And the way that they are transforming lives locally through how they treat their customers, but also their employees, it is bringing the faith, if you will, to people, because they don't necessarily have to talk about their faith, but when they understand why does Dan do the things he does, they understand, oh, wow, it's because of his faith. And I think that that's what we can achieve through Catholic founders. I shouldn't say I think. I know that's what we can, because we don't have to even have all the answers. If we genuinely pursue transformation of our own hearts, if we ask God, please transform my heart, allow me to be more like you, we don't even have to know the answers. We just have to allow him to act through us. He will affect the lives of everyone that we encounter. And we don't even know it sometimes, right? In most cases, we don't. So that's the dream is I want people to take this idea seriously and to go out and do it. And ideally, we can then take those lessons and those learnings that we come up with from each other and through the people I have on the podcast, and turn them into frameworks, turn them into methods and principles that we can understand. Here's how I approach these circumstances. Here's some tactical advice on what benefits to offer my employees. How do I handle if somebody is underperforming, like in a charitable way? What do I do about these different items? So that's the goal with it. And I'll just address this briefly. Like, I've thought about, what could I do to go full-time on Catholic Founders? I'm very confident I could get it to a point where it does provide for my needs, but part of me feels that it's not the right thing to do, because the lessons I get from Catholic Founders, from talking to these people, I can then apply them to this quote unquote real business that I run of ErthSearch. And that gives me the ability to test a lot of these things out in real life, where I run a business that is secular on the outside, but internally very like virtuous and Christian in nature. And there's other things I want to do in the future too that I don't think I would ever, we'll see, but I don't believe that Catholic Founders will ever be necessarily my full-time thing. But I do think it's going to continue to scale and grow, and we'll be able to impact the lives of many, many people through it. But it's just probably not going to be my full-time business.
Okay, well, that's and I'm here to tell you, I think you can make it your full-time business, but we're going to let you come to that decision on your own. One of the things that I'm doing in 2026 is being boldly Catholic and just letting people know, hey, this is who I am. And one of the things I tell people is that doesn't mean we only work with Catholics. It means we work with everyone through a lens of respect, conscience, and deep care for human beings behind that title. Because leadership at its core is moral work, and for us, faith provides the compass. So we want you to know that you don't have to be Catholic to work with us, but we're going to treat you that way. And when you were talking, it reminded me a lot of St. Francis's quote, his famous quote, it says, preach the gospel always, and when necessary, use words. You lead by example. You want people to say, man, why is that guy so good? Why is that guy always so happy? And then when they ask you, you can say, well, these are the things that I do that relate to my faith that help me stay grounded and treat people well and be generous with my wealth. I love the example you gave of living generously. How much money do you need? Have you read Matthew Kelly's Slowing Down to the Speed of Joy?
Mm-mm.
Probably not. As fast as you move, you don't want to slow down, right?
But slowing down is very important.
Yeah. Slowing down to the speed of joy, he talks about the fact that you've got to get slow down every day and listen, right? And listen to God, listen for that guidance. But he also talks about joy being Jesus, others, and yourself. Put your priorities in that order. But in slowing down to the speed of joy, we also get to be in leisure. And that's something a lot of people don't do. And slow down enough to enjoy the day off, the Sabbath, as Jeff likes to say, Sabbath like you mean it. Take the day off, really do. Go to mass worship, spend time with your family. You mentioned you're recently married. How does your family play into your business and how much you work? Because I can imagine you probably put in a lot of hours.
Yes, that's correct. So, this idea of speed broadly, I'll just address it. My general takes on this. So, I think that there are people who are called to build things and to build them in a very fast way, right? The traditional Silicon Valley, like startup culture where you have to scale very quickly because if you don't, somebody else will eat your lunch. I understand that. And for a long time, I resisted that was the right way to build a business. But I've had discussions with people and the summary of my conclusions is, hey, there are businesses that can only be scaled with a venture-backed kind of model, with the speed model. And we'd rather have Catholics building those companies than not Catholics. So you might as well, like, those people should lean into their calling, right? However, I do think that those are outliers. I think that the majority of people, just like the majority of people are called to married life, right? Not the majority of people are called to religious life. Obviously, we do have a shortage of vocations in some ways, and I have thoughts on that too. But let's talk about the average person, right? The average Catholic man or woman who wants to start a business, right? You have responsibilities. You need to provide for your family. You need to be there for your family because we have a very easy way to understand this, and people don't sometimes visualize this. So I'll just speak it out loud here. Number one, we were created to know, love, and serve God. That's the only objective. We're supposed to get to heaven. So that must always be at the forefront of things. Number two, then we have a vocation, our primary vocation. It's either to the religious life or to married life in most cases, with obviously, some minor exceptions. And then thirdly, we have our secondary vocation, which is our vocation in the world, our career, if you will. If you ever put your career ahead of either of those two things, you are living a disordered life. So if you want to live an orderly life, it's very simple. Why not put the first things of your day as those things for God, right? Put God at first thing of your day. Go to mass in the morning. Say 30 minutes to an hour of prayer. Do some hallow readings or listening to different prayers there. Build a routine that gives God the first fruit. Then schedule the things for your family that need to be there. Dinners, breakfast, whatever those things are with your family, put them on your calendar as immovable blocks. And then if you want to fill in, if you are an entrepreneur, my belief is that you can then kind of fill in the rest of your calendar with entrepreneurial activities, with building your business. As long as you are making sure that you do the things that you're required and not just the bare minimum. I'm not talking about just barely being there. I'm talking about doing these things with excellence because we are called primarily to pass on the faith to our children, right? That is not something that you can just do willy-nilly by accident. You have to put a lot of effort and attention into it. So you have to put those things there. However, there are a lot of ways where you can actually use your business and the way you run your business and the activities of that as a way to teach your children as well. So you can bring them along for the ride. They don't have to be separated, right? I think Jeff is one of the best examples of this, Jeff Scheffelbein, about living an undivided life, right? You don't change who you are at work and when you're at home. Like, you should be a good person always at all times.
Yeah.
And if that means that you can somehow bring your children to work and have them see what you're doing and be there with them, I think there's a lot of different creative ways that you can do this. I've believed for a long time that, especially in places like Latin America, where maybe both parents tend to work and they're, let's say, a blue collar job at some sort of factory. If I'm a factory owner, you know what I'm doing? I'm building a school literally right next to the facility so that the parents can come together with their children, drop their children off at this like a very well done school. I'm not talking about some kind of shambles thing, just really, really nice, top of the line. And also have a daycare right there. Have people that they're on site. If they need to step away and be with their children, they can, because that's way more important than the business, right? It's always going to be more important. If you start to prioritize business and GDP above the family unit, you destroy society, because the society is based upon the family unit. So that's my general take on it. And that's how I run my life, is I try to make sure that the core things, the core necessary items of my faith and my family are there. And in many cases, those are together, right? We're together as a family. We're praying. We're going to mass together. We're doing these things together. Sabbath, I have been very bad with, I will say, especially these past few months, as we just relocated to Nashville. But
yeah, I saw that in one of your interviews.
Yeah, so we just relocated to Nashville. But so moving was a lot of things, and I also put out so much content. But I will say that I'm in the process right now of doing Exodus 90, and it's really refreshing me on the process of being willing to set aside that time on Sunday for God completely, right? To actually be intentional about leisure. And I think this is something high activity or high achiever, high agency people forget, is that you don't have to just be doing nothing. It's not like you're sitting around twiddling your thumbs. And it's also not just watching football, right? It's finding things to enjoy, classical music or other music that you like to play, instruments, read poetry, I don't know, whatever it is, but do leisure with intention, these things that can kind of elevate the mind. That is something that took me a long time to understand, even though I read Joseph Pieper's book a long time ago. Leisure is I think it's called Leisure is the Basis of Society or something like that. Really good book for anybody who's a high achiever. But the point is, you have to do these things. And I'm definitely getting better at the Sunday piece. But if you are, I want to address this, because a lot of people don't put the time aside because they're worried. They have anxiety that their business is going to fail, that they're not going to hit their targets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let me ask you this. What does that really matter? First of all, do you not trust in God? If God called you on this path, do you not trust in him for your daily bread? In many cases, I find that the people I really like dig in with on these items, the reason they're anxious is because they're living a lifestyle that's way more than they need to, in a much more expensive place, driving expensive cars. If they lived a modest life, they wouldn't have as much monthly financial burn. And as a result, they could spend time more with their family. So in many cases, you've built a prison of your own making, and people just forget to recognize this. So you need to trust in God that he will provide for you. This is a fundamental point of our faith, is that we do trust that God will provide for us. If we don't take the actions that show that we trust in God, then our faith is nothing, right? Faith of mental assent is one thing, but a faith has to be one of action too, because the action indicates that we have actual belief behind our mental assent. The example that just happened recently in the church life is the example of the Magi, right? The three wise men. These guys, I'll try to do the very short version of this because it's one of my favorite things. It's one of my absolute favorite examples of faith leading to action. These Magi were most likely kind of a continuation of these people who were taught how to read the stars. It's believed that God taught Adam how to read the stars as a hope for the Messiah. So they kind of had an idea the Messiah will come at this time because we understand how to read the stars. That would have been passed down generation to generation. And it's believed that the wise men were advisors to, at one point, King David. And then obviously these were descendants of those people, like disciples of those people originally. That they were looking at the stars from far away and said, wow, based on all of the prophecies, the Old Testament prophecies, we know like mentally that, hey, it's time to go. We have to go over 700, 800 miles to find the Messiah. They could have, think about modern day. Like if you told somebody like, here's all the logical argument for these things and here's the prophecies, they'd be like, cool, I'm going to stay here and drink my coffee, right? They decided to get a posse of probably somewhere between maybe 1,000 to 10,000 people and journey like 800, 900 miles to go find the Messiah. They go to Bethlehem. They're looking around like, hey, where's this guy? It probably took them roughly a year to find Jesus, by the way. It wasn't like 6 days later. They then go around, they find him and they worship him. So their mental belief turned into actions that they were willing to sacrifice this kind of uncomfortable journey and go all this way to truly prove that they believed in the Messiah. So this kind of journey that the Magi take, I believe, is the journey that we as Catholic entrepreneurs need to take. We need to take this faith. If we do believe it, we need to turn it into action.
Man, I love that. In the way, hold on one second. Let me get in here with you. There I am. The way that you brought that story to life, and you brought it back to the business side of it, right? It's really is, in when we read Genesis, or when we read John, in the beginning there was the Word. Everything began with the Word, the spoken word, leading to action, leading to. So it begins with a thought. I always tell entrepreneurs, if you think it, write it down. Or say it out loud and then take action, right? And then that's how you build things. And I love how you use that story with the Magi. And nobody ever thinks about it. You didn't just show up with 3 guys on camels and go 800 miles. I love that you brought up the all the support that had to go along with creating that. The other thing I really liked is the way you ordered it. I think it's very good advice for entrepreneurs, for anybody who's trying to lead a faith-filled life. Start with God, get the work in, finish with God. You got to make that God sandwich, and really making the time for either daily mass or deep meditation and prayer, so that you're actually having those thoughts that you need to have.
And I want to jump in there. It's also important that if you want to be a good leader, I mean, the whole point of this podcast is leadership. If you want to be a good leader, you can't lead the whole point of leading is to bring people in a certain direction, right?
Right.
How do you know the direction you're called to go if you don't know what God is calling you to, right? You cannot know these things without spending time with him. Yes, sure. You can come up with your own versions of where you want to head, and you can do your own plans. But how many of us know very tangibly in our own lives that we've made plans, we've tried to pursue certain objectives, and it just doesn't work, right? And or leads the wrong way. God has like unlimited knowledge about everything. He knows everything. We have very finite knowledge. We can only see a handful of steps. Even the brightest minds only understand so much. So why are we so willing to listen to our own intellects and our own ideas about where to steer the ship, when we have God who knows literally everything, and he wills our good? He only wants things to happen for our good. And he also, like, imagine when you're a business owner and you start to get, I only have, I think, 8 contractors now. Mm-hmm. Imagine when you have hundreds or thousands of employees. Can you imagine trying to remember every single one of their kids' names, what their motivations in life are? Like, it's probably not possible. I haven't gotten to that point yet, so I'll tell you when I do. But the point is, God remembers that for everybody. All, 8 billion people on the planet now? Or I forget the number.
Yeah, 8.2 billion, yeah.
He knows that for everybody, and he is directing you if you just trust him. You don't know always what's behind the next curtain, but he knows what's going on. And if you are you have 2 options, basically. Do I trust in my own will, or do I trust in his will to guide me?
No, that makes a ton of sense. And we talked earlier about trust, right? The importance of trust, putting your trust in him, who knows everything. He knows, he's counted every hair on your head. He knows you. He knows everybody's kids' names. I love that you brought that up. One of my fellow coaches talks about the most successful man he ever met. He had thousands of employees, and he knew something personal about every employee. That's the importance of that connection, right? But I think one of the things I like to say is, when you make time for God, he makes time for everything else. I have found that if I ever get too busy that I don't have time to pray in the morning or go to mass, and then I go through my day and I kind of just blow it off, I get really busy and I don't get anything done. But when I make the time, all of a sudden the priorities come into play. I have the important conversations. I interviewed Father Louis Levi Hager yesterday. He's a Norbertine priest out of California, and we had a great conversation. One of the things he said, Dan, you have to make time for these types of conversations where you're talking to people about good things, right? What we're talking about is some good things that are important, that are going to help us and help the people that we impact lead better lives, lead Catholic-led lives that are going to lead us to heaven. I was talking with my 14-year-old daughter. I hear little voices in the background. So you're going to tell us how many kids you have and what's going on back there. But my 14-year-old, we're talking about priorities. And a lot of people, I saw this in a TikTok, and I said, here's what most people worry about when their kids are in high school: their grades, their sports, and their extracurriculars. And what they should be worrying about is their soul, and their soul. Yeah. That's it. Those are the priorities. Our job is to help our children, obviously, as a father, get to heaven, and help as many bring along as many people as we can, because we have a calling to get to heaven, but we don't want to get there alone and find that all your friends didn't come because and you had an opportunity to evangelize, right?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So who are we hearing in the background, by the way, Silas?
Yeah, we have a 1-year-old. She's 14 months now, Kitahara. Yeah, it's a journey. We're, like I said, we're in this temporary small spot while we're moving to Nashville. We get a long-term place. So my wife is kindly in the back there, kind of keeping Kitahara at bay.
Kitahara, and she's 14 months old. Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
She just made her podcast debut, unless somebody else has heard her. She made her podcast debut at 14 months on the Lead Different podcast. What have I not asked you, Silas, that you want to make sure we talk about today?
I mean, I think everything, we've covered a lot of things that I like to talk about. The overwhelming point I want to make to people is that this is not just some suggestion, and I'm not just trying to like be out here like knock you over the head. Like, you have to remember that this is the most exciting thing that you could ever imagine. If you think that if you're somebody especially who loves adventure, just imagine that God has the most wonderful adventure that you could ever imagine, beyond your wildest dreams that you could ever imagine. And he has it planned for you. If you're just willing to trust him and to go swim down that river and go wherever he has planned for you. If you do that, you will be happier than ever. You will have the most wonderful experience, especially if you were somebody who said, I want to live the coolest life. You will live the coolest life that you could possibly live if you trust in God. Whether you're a business owner, whether you're called to just be a stay-at-home mom, whether you are called to just be a good employee and lead your team well, it doesn't matter. You need to learn to lean into that, because especially if you like this, that is just like the most motivating thing ever. You've got this incredible guide who literally created the entire universe, and he is there guiding you towards him on this incredible, lovely journey. And it's just up to you to accept it. Like the whole point is like, there's no striving that you have to do. It really comes down to just simply relaxing and saying, God, I accept this. I welcome you into my life. Please help me to love you more than I love anything else. And I trust in you. And that's all you have to do. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to have a high IQ. It's very simple. Just ask God to come into your heart, to transform it, and to guide you wherever he's calling you.
That you couldn't have said it better, Silas. It has been an absolute pleasure to spend some time with you, to meet your daughter in the background, to learn what drives Catholic founders, what drives you. I knew this was going to be a good interview, and you have not disappointed. Lead Different podcast listeners, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to leave us some comments. If something Silas said touched you today, leave us a comment and we'll get back to you. We want to make sure we interact with you. We want to make sure we're going to put all of Silas's contact information down below as you listen to the podcast. Silas, it has been an absolute pleasure to spend some time with you. What do you say we end the show on that note?
Absolutely, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week, and we look forward to seeing you guys back next week on the Lead Different podcast. Have a great weekend.
This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different, because great leaders change the world.